We're going to juror number 9. Wherever you want. Good afternoon. Have a seat.
Thank you. How's your lunch break?
Pretty good. How about yours?
Fine.
I'm glad we were able to provide you with lunch since
Yeah,
you had
thank
to
you.
stay over.
I do really appreciate that.
Well, since this is, we know, never a precise where we get to everybody in the morning,
Yeah.
just as a safety net, we buy
Yeah,
a couple
I get it.
lunches.
Thank you.
So, all right. A couple things before I turn the questioning over to the attorneys. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all the questions and all the answers you give to the questions are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I swear.
All right, thank you. Okay, and we are going to be referring to you by number. No
Okay.
disrespect intended. It's just that it protects your privacy.
Yeah.
And the first thing I want to talk about is your questionnaire, which you received and filled out. Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Is everything on that questionnaire true as far as you can recall?
Yeah, as far as I can recall, to the best of my ability, I try to take my time with it, so.
It appeared so, because you have a lot of extensive answers, so that's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
Sorry, I was kind of methodical about it, yeah.
No, the lawyers, I actually like that. You get a lot of answers, they get a lot of information.
Yeah.
Are there any changes or additions to the questionnaire? Because sometimes after it's sat for a while and you
Yeah,
realize...
when you think about a question like, oh, maybe not or whatever. I thought about that maybe if I read it again, but again, I tried to be pretty, I took my time. I really took my time with it. I didn't fill it out right away when I got it. It took a few days, so.
Sounds like a very deliberative person.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, the attorneys are going to probably follow up, and so if something they ask you about in the questionnaire, you want to give it different or amend your answer, that's fine.
Okay.
Not like you're going to get in trouble or anything.
Okay.
It's very natural that you fill out the questionnaire and then other things come to mind.
Right.
Now, since you filled out the questionnaire, you have some familiarity with the facts of this case from the media, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
And the questionnaire specifically advised you to avoid any further media about it or to read about it or investigate. And the question is, sometimes inadvertently, jurors will see a headline or someone will talk to them and provide new information you are not aware of. Has anything like that happened since you filled out the questionnaire and today in court? Any new facts you've learned or other?
No, nothing new, just kind of repetitive stuff that you'd seen multiple times or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing new that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, excellent. Now, you have to decide the case only on what you hear and see in the courtroom, so we acknowledge that everybody, just about everybody has seen or heard about this case.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even formed opinions, maybe even formed strong opinions about the case. But what you have to do as a juror is decide the case only on what you hear in the courtroom, the evidence, and based on the law, and apply the law as I give it to you. Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
Okay. And did you recognize any of the witnesses who were on the witness list?
No.
All right. And the length of the trial, we're anticipating that if you were on the jury, that you would report back after today, March 29th, and the trial would be about 4 weeks.
Okay.
That's our best estimate.
Okay.
Does that work for you? Can
Yeah.
you okay. So no personal obligations that would cause it to be a problem?
I would set them aside. This is more important.
Okay, excellent. Anything else I should know before I turn you over to the attorneys?
No, nothing I can think of. Just with my medical condition, my type 1 diabetes, obviously, like, there's breaks that are taken and stuff, right? So I would get a chance to, like, check my blood sugar and everything during it. It wouldn't be like we'd be here from, like, 8 a.m. to, like, 6 p.m., like, no break or anything like that.
I think I couldn't stand that.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna make a juror do that.
Naturally, people need to, like, eat and stuff. So, yeah, just that, pretty much. As long as there would be, like, every, at least, like, once or whatever, I'd be able to get a chance to go take care of that. That would be it.
I'll just give you an idea. We rarely go beyond an hour and a half of testimony without a 20-minute break.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
That's really short. Okay.
And then, of course, we have a lunch break. And if we go into the evening, which would be a rare occasion,
Yeah.
there'd be a dinner break. But
Perfect. Okay, that was my only concern.
okay, one last thing. Generally, Mr. Nelson's going to be first to ask you questions. We are taking down a record of everything, so if you could use yes and no, which you seem to be doing just fine, as opposed to mm-hmm or uh-huh.
Yeah.
And also to make sure that you aren't talking over each other, because that's really hard for Ms. Carmichael, our court reporter. So it formalizes things a little much, but if we could try and do that, I'd appreciate that.
Understandable.
All right, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Yes, thank you.
And if you'd like, you can remove your mask.
Okay.
It's up to you, whichever you would.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being here today. And I wanted to thank you for your very insightful answers on the questionnaire.
No problem.
I'm going to just kind of ask you some general questions first. I'm going to follow up with some specific answers on your questionnaire, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's assume you and I were to meet in a different setting, a social setting of some sort. We were to start talking. What are a few things you'd want me to walk away knowing about you?
Personality-wise, or?
I'm sorry, Aaron, here we go. However, I mean, what do you like to do? What's your personality like? What would I walk away with knowing about juror number 9?
Well, I think that having type 1 diabetes is probably my main thing. If I were to, like, become friends with you, I'd want you to know that in case any concern, in case I would want you, to know. That I'm I would consider, go with the flow, open-minded type of person. Yeah, I feel like I'm just the type of person that I can have a conversation with anybody about anything, and, like, whether we agree or disagree, we can be mature adults and have a conversation, and then that be it, and go about our day.
Excellent. So when you first received your jury notice, what was your initial reaction?
I was super excited.
Excited?
Yeah, that's actually why I voted. So I was really surprised when I got back feedback right away. I was really excited. I didn't know what it was. I didn't care what it was. I was just excited to be summoned.
Okay. Why? What is it about jury duty that you find exciting?
First of all, I just find the whole jury court process fascinating, period. And also, I find it, how it's said, like, it's your civic duty and whatnot, and I find that very true. But most people, I think of it as an annoyance or hindrance on their everyday, but this is, like, what you decide, or you and a group of people decide, can determine the outcome of someone's life. Whether it be guilty or not guilty, that decision alone can affect their life for the rest of their life. So it's important for people who are going to take the time and be responsible about it and really, like, think it over, think it through, and make a proper decision. And, yeah, instead of just be like, oh, I want to get back to work tomorrow, and try to get out of there. So, yeah.
Do you think that a jury's decision affects people other than the defendant?
Absolutely.
How so?
Because also those people's lives can be affected. Say someone gets sent to jail, prison, whatever, and they're the breadwinner of the house, So now that other partner, whoever else, has to find income. They have to take time to go visit that person. It just affects everybody's life in many, many, many different ways.
What about if there were to be an acquittal?
I think It also affects that person because even if someone is not guilty, they're just being accused of something, most people just assume, oh, yep, they did it. So that person is going to have a hard time walking around town knowing, people just judge you right off the bat without any facts or anything. So somebody could be acquitted, found not guilty by a jury of their peers, and they still can't go to the grocery store without being harassed for whether it not be a long time, could be the rest of their life. Some people have probably moved towns because that has affected them. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Okay. So in this case, you're obviously familiar with why you're here in this case, right?
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah. What about Mr. Floyd's family? How do you think a decision would affect a victim's family?
I think it would affect a victim's family in the case where, if, again, they assume that that person's guilty and they're found not, they can be hurt, they can feel like they weren't heard, or that their person that, George Floyd wasn't important enough to people for them to make what they would consider the right decision, and certain things like that.
Okay. And so do you think that you can listen to all of the evidence in this case, both sides of the story, and base your decision on the evidence? Or would you be more concerned and focused on the effects of your decision on Mr. Chauvin or Mr. Floyd's family?
I think I could make an impartial decision based off of the evidence, yes.
Okay, great. Can you think of a situation, I'm going to go back, I'm sorry. So you were super excited to get your jury questionnaire. When you realized the case that it involved, did that opinion change?
No, I was still just as excited, even more so, just knowing that this is, it was a huge deal at the time. It still is. It's a very important case, not just for, Hennepin County or whatever, but just nationwide. A lot of different people feel very strongly about it on both sides, or, either way, in the middle, whatever. It's just something that, again, everyone's heard about, everyone's talked about, and everyone is going to hear about for even long after the trial is over. No matter what the decision, people are going to still talk about it. So it's just something very important to, it seems like, everyone.
Okay. Do you have any concerns for your own personal safety?
Yes and no, I guess. I maybe haven't thought about my own personal safety in this matter as much as maybe I should, but I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought about it. I understand where it could be at risk, but I'm not as concerned about it as I probably should be.
Okay. How did you feel when you came to court today and you saw the current condition of this building?
Everyone outside, you mean? I was surprised, actually. Yesterday was when we came, and then we got, dismissed early and had to come back. But I was kind of shocked. I wasn't expecting people to be out here already, considering the actual trial doesn't start until the 29th. So I think people have maybe jumped the gun a little bit, but that's okay. To each their own. But yeah, I was actually surprised.
So you're referring to the protesters and things like that?
Yeah.
How did you feel about, seeing the barricades and the soldiers?
I guess since we already went through that a lot last year, didn't really make me feel any type of way. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, just like as expected.
Okay. So can you think of a circumstance in your life where you have been called upon to resolve conflict between two people?
Yeah. My friends like to consider me a type of mediator.
Okay.
I'm always kind of like the level-headed one that's like, all right, so this is what this person's saying now, do you understand? And then I kind of get both sides to at least understand where that other side is coming from. Mm-hmm. Again, whether they agree or not, understanding is more important than agreeance, I think. So yeah, I'm usually the mediator between people.
Okay. And so how do you approach that situation? How do you mediate?
I usually just try to, whoever is the more worked up, whoever's the more frustrated, to me it seems like that person wants to be heard more at the time. So I'll be like, all right, what's your frustration? What's going on? Then they'll talk. I'll be like, all right, so do you understand why they feel like that? And if they don't, then I'll be like, okay, could you elaborate, And then kind of go back and forth. But I usually start with the person that's the most upset, get them to try to get their words out and everything and be understood, because I feel like usually people just want to be heard. So is mainly the problem when people are upset.
So in terms of that dispute, how do you resolve the dispute between, if there's a dispute? Somebody says this is what happened, somebody else said this is what happened, how do you resolve that dispute?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe just like from a logical standpoint. Everything's situational. Things aren't black and white, I don't think. So yeah, just depending on the situation and what would seemingly make the most sense to resolve, so either both parties are happy, or at least the person who might, in my opinion, be in the right, is happy. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want. So whether they take your advice or not, that's just kind of on them.
So I guess, ma'am, what I'm asking you is a little different. You have been called to sort of referee, right? Not necessarily calm people down, but to decide who's telling the truth. How do you decide when someone is telling the truth?
I think that body language, mannerisms, all of that is really important. Also, if you know that person's character, in this case, obviously I wouldn't know anyone's character, but in my personal cases, if you know that person's character, you know if they're maybe more prone to lying or telling the truth or what have you. So, but yeah, I feel like body language is a really big one for sure.
Okay. What about like extra evidence, right? Like, would you talk to other people? What would you do? How would you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if deemed necessary, absolutely, and see, like, could you corroborate this story or what have you?
Okay. Have you ever had a situation where you were certain about something and later found out you were wrong?
Of course.
Can you give me an example of that?
I can't give you an example off the top of my head. I'm sure we're human beings. We all have our certainties, and then we're proven wrong later on.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about COVID-19 in sitting in this trial?
No.
So I'm just going to ask you a few questions about your questionnaire here.
Okay.
So you're familiar generally with the story, right?
Yes.
What is alleged to have occurred back in May. You've watched the video only one time. By the video, the Facebook video?
Yes.
Okay. There's a question on the questionnaire that says, from what you've seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant, Mr. Chauvin? And you said somewhat negative, and then it asks you, why do you feel that way? And there was no response. Why did you answer that you have a somewhat negative impression of Mr. Chauvin?
Again, just from, that's the only thing I've ever seen of this person, and that video, just makes you sad. I feel like it's just, nobody wants to see somebody die, whether it was like his fault or not. Nobody wants to see that, it's just hard to watch something. So, yeah, and of course, obviously, you see all of these people talking and saying things and coming at someone's character on social media and stuff, so the perception that you're given is negative, but then when you actually think back on it, you're like, okay, I don't know this person though, so I feel like this, but again, I could be proven wrong or whatever. So, but yeah, just from the interpretation of social media and, like what people say on Facebook and stuff like that, your family, your friends or whatever is, yeah.
And so you've talked with your family and friends about this situation before you.
Yeah, like when it first happened, like right away.
Okay. And have you had a lot of conversations about it since?
No, not really.
Okay. You also indicated that, and there's a question that says, do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since Mr. Floyd's death? And you said somewhat positive. Could you explain that for me?
Read the question again. I'm sorry.
Sure. Do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since Mr. Floyd's death?
And I said somewhat positive, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think just in the idea of recognizing that some people are unfortunately discriminated against, and it is a thing that happens. And so just positive in the sense of just like awareness pretty much. Because, I mean, I'm sure seeing something like that was some people's first, like, visual of being like, oh, somebody's been discriminated against. I've actually never seen that, so I didn't know it was a real thing. So, yeah, just in the sense of, for the first time, some people might have seen that something bad can happen to somebody because they look or are a certain way.
Right. I mean, I don't want to press you, but I guess the question is, you formed an opinion that discrimination was occurring when you watched that video.
That it's a possibility, I think.
Okay.
Or not even in that, just that stuff like that happens. I guess I don't really know how to explain what I'm trying to say.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you are recognizing that that's one possible explanation for what happened.
Yes, it's a possible explanation.
Can you think of other possible explanations?
As to why that happened? Maybe that person was, again, if an officer is on top of you or something, you were possibly resisting arrest, you were fighting back, they felt the need to in that situation, that they or someone else's civilians' lives could have been in danger if they didn't put this person in,
Okay.
that type of thing.
So you're open to exploring alternative
Yes.
options for whatever happened.
Yes.
And you're willing to hear all of the evidence.
Yes, I want to.
You want to. And there are two sides to every story, agreed?
Absolutely.
Would you be able to keep your mind open until you hear both sides?
Absolutely.
You have a relative who is a police officer?
Yes.
Is he or she, is he a police officer here in the metro area?
No. Up north in Brainerd.
Do you talk to your relative about that?
About him being an officer? Yeah, I ask him questions and stuff, just like stuff I would like to know, not like any racial bias stuff, just random questions like, what would I do if I got pulled over? And, that kind of thing. So I'll just ask him questions to help me get out of trouble a little bit.
Okay, fair enough. It's always good to know police, right?
Right, exactly. It is. It's good to know lots of different types of people.
So let me say if you were a juror on this case, and, before I ask you that question, have you talked to your relative who is a police officer about this case?
I have not.
Do you see that person frequently?
During holidays. I wouldn't say so frequent, major holidays.
So if you were a juror on this case, and you were learning about certain training techniques, would you call up your relative and be like, hey, is this right?
Well, I know we're not allowed to talk about the case, so I wouldn't.
Okay.
But, I mean, maybe if it was, I probably just wouldn't. I would wait till after or something.
Okay. There was a couple of questions. You've had some martial arts training.
Very little.
Okay. Nothing of any, you're not a black belt?
No extensive training whatsoever.
Okay. But they asked a question, is during a martial arts training class, you actually were put into some type of a restraint or chokehold?
Yeah, that was one of the things. I don't know if it was necessarily a chokehold, but it was around and then arm around neck. What happens if you get in this position and how to get out of it. That's what it was.
Okay. But
they weren't extreme about it. They didn't actually choke you out or anything. Just you could feel the pressure on your neck and how to get out of it.
Okay. There were a series of questions about that kind of asked you to rank your opinion from a 1 to a 5, from a strongly agree to strongly disagree. I just have a couple of questions about that, your answers on that. One of the questions was, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system. And you said you strongly agreed with that. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I just feel like there's a lot of documents and things you can look up that can kind of prove that as evidence, just statistics and stuff like that you can look up, and the incarceration rate versus the actual population of that amount of people in the nation and whatnot. Just a lot of statistics and stuff can
support
agree
that.
with. Yeah, can support that.
Okay. There was a question specifically to the Minneapolis Police Department that Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than when dealing with white suspects, and you somewhat agreed with that. Have you have a personal experience in terms of friends or?
Yeah, not me personally, but I know people that they have had poor experiences. And where I grew up, which is northern Minnesota, where there's not nearly the amount of policing and everything like that, it's just a really small town and stuff, and I hardly saw it, so I just kind of assumed it was a big city thing, I guess. But yeah, not from my personal experiences, just from what I've heard from close people.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about the Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. Do you recall your responses, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I think I said something like, I like the idea of what they're supposed to stand for, but I think that's been turned into a propaganda scheme by companies and stuff just to get you to buy their stuff. So to me, it's just like, say Nike or whoever's like, yeah, we love black people, Black Lives Matter, but it's like, come buy our stuff now. You know what I mean? So that's really what I think it is, honestly.
Sure. So you think it's turned into like a marketing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And Blue Lives Matter, similar?
Yeah, same thing. Just, Black Lives Matter was already a thing, and they just piggybacked off of the same letter hashtag, so it's literally just the same thing.
Okay. I have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we have just a brief sidebar?
Sure. Juror 9, I am going to find under Minnesota Rule of Criminal Procedure 26.02 that we're going to ask some questions, and I think your legitimate privacy interests merit that it kind of be without the audio playing. So we're not going to go into depth, but I think it's appropriate that we turn off the audio so that we can ask you some questions. Basically about your diabetes.
Thank you for your concerns.
Okay.
Good afternoon, juror number 9.
Good afternoon.
So you're a former 218er, I understand?
Yes.
All right. And you grew up in northern Minnesota there most of your life?
Yes.
And I saw that the place you grew up, did you grow up in the same area where you have a relative who's a police officer?
Where he is a police officer he lives pretty far away. So I grew up in the same area as where he lives, but not where he actually is an officer.
All right. So you didn't have to have any concern that he'd be the one pulling you over
No.
or doing anything?
Unless I was obviously driving through that county or whatever, but no.
Sure. Can you please just share with us how much contact you have with your uncle? I don't know how many uncles you have or how big your family
Yeah,
is.
again, major holidays, like Christmas, Thanksgiving, those kinds of things, birthdays. And then I'll randomly text him, call him or whatever, hit him up just if I have a question about something, or I'm like, oh, hey, I got a ticket, da-da-da-da-da, just that kind of thing. So, yeah, I have a good relationship with him.
All right. Aside from major family gatherings and occasionally asking him for advice, is this a relative you have regular contact with? Like you would see him once a month,
No.
once a week?
No, not that often.
I need to ask you, just with having a family member as a law enforcement officer, do you think, as you sit here today, that you might credit the testimony of a police officer more than that of just another citizen, say a bystander?
No.
And why is that? Why do you think that you'd be able to evaluate each person's testimony?
Well, I guess I would just hope that they're supposed to be under oath, so they're not lying, whether they're, an officer or not. I would just hope that they're telling the truth, plain and simple.
Okay. And so do you believe then, as you just kind of search your mind, that despite the fact that one of the witnesses wears the uniform, is a law enforcement officer, that witness's testimony would be on equal footing as, say, just a passerby?
Yeah.
And your reason for that is because everybody's under oath.
Well, that, and also, I just think if someone sees what they saw, maybe people exaggerate sometimes, but I would just think if they would, I don't know, I guess I just would trust that they're going to be honest, even if it was brief sighting or they witnessed the whole event, they'd just be honest about it.
So let me ask you then, if you're confronted with a situation as a juror in which witness A testifies a certain way, and witness B testifies a completely different way. Witness B is a law enforcement officer, witness A is not. What would you use to distinguish and determine which person is telling the truth?
Assuming that one of them is lying, or again, I guess the body language, the way people talk, if they seem like they're nervous, not just because this is a situation where you're just kind of naturally anxious or nervous, but they're nervous I need to say this certain thing or whatever, I guess just the human perception of that person's mannerisms and body language. A lot. People can tell you a lot without actually telling you a lot.
I want to talk to you a little bit about something you outlined as some prior knowledge that you have about this case. And I believe that you got this knowledge from media sources. And you indicated that when an autopsy came out, people were talking about how he, meaning George Floyd, had drugs in his system. And that's something that you made note of. Was that information you paid particular attention to?
No, I'd never seeked that out. I just, when you see it in comments and stuff, and people are like, oh, well, he had such and such in his system, and it's like, oh, and then you just keep going by, and people want to bring that up and make it important, whether it is or not. People decide, So yeah, that was pretty much just it.
Some people might comment on something like that, that someone who dies and they have drugs in their system, they have themselves to blame. How would you respond to a comment like that? What do you believe?
Situational, I think everything is, but I don't know. I don't really necessarily agree with that statement. If someone had drugs in their system and they were in a situation where that would exacerbate the things, that could be the thing, or maybe it was the thing, maybe it was the drugs. Again, you never know. Everything is situational. That could have everything to do with it, or it could have absolutely nothing to do with it.
Getting back to a situation where you say you're at a family gathering and you see your uncle and you've served as a juror in this case. And if the evidence proved guilt and there was a conviction, do you think that it would be difficult for you to have a conversation about this with your uncle?
No, I don't think so.
How hard do you think it would be for you to justify your service to your uncle if a conviction were returned?
I mean, he knows me, and he knows that I wouldn't just base something off of feelings and off of one piece of information or evidence. He knows that if it were to come to a conclusion, and if that were the case, that I would hope he would know that, it was all thought through, and it wasn't just me, obviously, that came to the conclusion. It was 11 other people or whatever. So, yeah, I would just...
And would his opinion be important to you?
It would, but it wouldn't make a difference if it would be. I mean, his opinion is important to me, but not so much so that it would sway my decision either way.
And are there other members of your family who might feel the same way as your uncle, who you would have any concern explaining after the fact what your decision was?
My family knows who I am, and they know I'm not going to go back on what I think or feel, regardless of their thoughts of me or my decisions.
One thing I'd like to follow up on, and I think you made it clear when defense counsel was asking you questions about your ability to put opinions aside, right, and judge the case on its merits, and I think you said you could do that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the answer you gave, was absolutely. When the judge questioned you about that earlier, you said, and I quote, "I think I could be fair." And I need to make sure that we're very clear, because sometimes people, maybe from northern Minnesota, don't say things as affirmatively, right?
Yeah.
It's always "I think," or "that's pretty good." And so I just need to know, as you sit here today, can you be fair to both sides and set aside any opinions or preconceived notions you have about this case and decide it based solely on the evidence that's presented to you and the instructions that the court gives you?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Collins?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Moving on this jury.
Awesome.
Accordingly, I'm going to ask that you report back here on March 29th,
Okay.
and at 9 a.m. for now.
Okay.
You'll probably get more instructions. And in case that date changes, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
As you've already experienced,
Yeah.
there are delays. We are pretty confident, though, that we'll be ready to go on that date
Okay.
with the actual evidence in the trial itself. So, in the meantime, you're not an investigator. Do not
Yes.
go out looking. Do not avoid all media to the extent you can. And then we'll see you back here. One thing you need to keep with you is that letter with the sticker on it and your number,
Okay.
because that's your pass to get in here. And so it's very important that you keep that safe and bring it with you.
Okay. And just in case, will I be getting another letter to remind me of the date and time and everything, or is there a number I should call?
You can always call the jury number. Generally, if there's a change, we reach out to you.
Okay.
We might do that in this case in any event, just because it's going to be 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we'll probably send a reminder call to everybody. But if you don't hear from us, you can always call back, but also March 29th at 9 o'clock.
Sounds good. Thank
Okay,
you very much,
any
sir.
questions?
No, I don't
Okay,
think so.
then you can go with the deputy.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. We have the next group is a new group to read the initial instructions, so we're going to do that. I'm just curious if you have any sense for how many we'll be able to get through before the end of the day at 4:30. Keeping in mind we have a 20-minute break probably after the next juror. That was juror number 9, which is a grand total of 6 for the day. I'm thinking of keeping 3. We're off the record, by the way, but we can stay on. We can stay on audio and video, but we're off the record.